Hello, my name is Frances Bench, and I'm going to introduce Santiago Peregrino. Santiago was raised in El Paso, Texas. He is first generation of immigrant parents from Mexico. Santiago received his BA and his MA from the University of El Paso, Texas, and his law degree from the University of Michigan. He practiced law for 5 years before coming to Delta College, where he taught for 25 years.
Cherie says that I've been here for a long time. Let me start by saying that's true. I retired last year after putting in about 25 years here. I started in 1970. Yes, 1970. 37 years ago I started teaching here. Taught for 4 years, 70 to 74. Then went to law school, 74 to 77, down to University of Michigan. Then practiced law for 5 years. And then returned to the classroom in 1983 until I retired again about a year and a half ago. I quickly found out I was not quite ready for retirement, and so I came back teaching part-time. Just to put into it. But let me write my topic on the board. My name is, I could have said, mi nombre es, the same thing. Me llamo Santiago Peregrino. It's okay if you can roll the R's. I'll respond to just about anything. Bienvenidos a mi mundo. Welcome to my world. When I walked in, I heard some very exciting words and phrases. Perfect springboard for me. I heard culture. I heard upbringing. I heard similarities cross-cultural, and by implication, differences cross-cultural, diversity. I heard about whether it's natural or not to categorize, classify, organize, etc. Normally, when I speak to classes like this one, and I've done it with this class a couple of semesters back, normally I talk about the legal aspects of diversity. I talk about the legal aspects of discrimination. I talk about affirmative action, Proposition 2, case law, latest Supreme Court decisions, etc. Which is a part of this course, if you will. But I think the key part is the diversity part as far as diversity of cultures. So guess what? I want to tell you about my world, my culture. I started by putting my title on the board in Spanish because guess what? This language that I'm speaking right now is a second language for me. I do okay by it. I struggled many years to learn it, believe me. I was 23 years old, believe me, still struggling to hear certain sounds in the English language that don't exist in the Spanish language. Like what, you ask? The short I sound. The short I sound. As in that. Okay? Sure. That sound. Short I. That sound does not exist in the Spanish language. how do you teach someone a sound that their ears cannot hear because there's nothing to relate to it in their native language? So you take a good Mexican like me, especially when I was a little Santiago, trying to be a good student, and the teacher would say, by the way, I started learning English when my parents enrolled me in school. I was 8 years old, because my parents knew nothing about compulsory education laws, okay? They enrolled me in school when they thought I was old enough to cross a highway, busy highway, to get to the school, okay? Yeah, I was a big baby. I'd be 8 years old before I could cross the street. And in those days, as far as being taught English, because I knew no English, we spoke Spanish 100% of the time at home. In those days, they taught English using the old look-see method.
What brought you to Michigan?
When I was finishing my master's degree from the University of Texas El Paso, believe it or not, Delta showed up at my doorstep. Because in 1970, listen to this, someone pointed out to Delta College that most of the faculty here came from Michigan institutions. University of Michigan, Michigan State, and Central Michigan. Nothing wrong with that, but you're not offering your students much diversity. Almost inbreeding, okay? And so Delta College, bless their souls, put together a recruiting team that consisted of several mini teams. And they sent them to many different parts of the U.S. to recruit people from different institutions. And one of those many teams landed at UT El Paso, and they were there hiring political science teachers, English teachers, and who knows what else. Well, when they approached the political science department, my department head at the time told them, you need to talk to Peregrino. So they talked me to coming up here in the summer of 1970. No one mentioned any winter. And upon walking outside the airport, the MBS airport, I fell in love with Michigan. Keep in mind that El Paso is desert country. Less than 10 inches of rain per year. Okay? And when it snows in El Paso, about every 5 years, there's maybe 1 or 2 inches of snow. Everything closes down because there's no salt or snow plows, nothing. Whole thing shuts down. Of course, the birth rate goes up. Anyway, I fell in love with Michigan. I had never seen so much greenery in my life. I had never seen such tall trees in my life. I had never seen so much water in my life. I fell in love with Michigan. So by the end of the second day of visit here, they seduced me into coming up here. And I discovered, I'm glad I did, that I was a very adaptable person. I had no idea that I would adapt as quickly as I did to Michigan. It took me about 24 hours to adapt to my first Michigan winter. Nothing really, nothing. Now, another person who was recruited along with me to teach English, he lasted 2 years. And he says, Santiago, how can you stand it here? Michigan, you're weird. How can you stand the snow? And don't you miss hearing Spanish? Don't you miss Mexican food? Yeah, I'll go back there. But I find this exciting. The diversity here of this new environment for me. Listen to this. When winter was about to arrive, someone told me, Santiago, you have to get some snow tires. What's that? Special tires that you need to drive in the snow. Really? Yes. You better do it before winter arrives. I said, okay. So I went to the tire store, and I told the clerk there, I want some snow tires. He says, how many do you want? I said, how many do people get? Oh, sometimes 2, sometimes 4. So I'll take 2. Where do you want them? In the trunk? Top of the car? What, on the car? Where on the car? Front driver was fine. And then she said, do you want studs? I said, wait a minute, now you're getting personal, okay? I bought a whole bunch of winter clothing. I quickly gave it away. Dozens of sweaters and gloves and boots and hats and scarves. Give me a break. How many layers of clothing do you need to get from your back door to your car? Huh? How many layers of clothing do you need to get from the parking lot here? Give me a break. I don't know how many agencies know there are out there, but look, I'm wearing my best dress shoes, okay? Any other questions? My father then came over in that fashion. In the meantime, in the state that's below or south of the state of Chihuahua, the state of Durango, in the city of Durango, my mother was born. And she went through the same experiences with the family, actually sadder and more tragic, I'll tell you in a second. But then she wound up joining that stream, winding up in Juarez, and crossing over when no one was looking. My mother was as illegal as can be till the day she died. She paid someone $2 to carry her piggyback across the Rio Grande River. Yep. Now, the reason she was forced to do that, if you will, is because my mother was born into a very abusive situation, a very abusive father. Till the day she died, she had no recollection of a mother, but she remembers a very abusive father, and she remembers having 2 brothers and a sister, older, and she remembers families frequently coming home to save the kids from being abused by the father. And the neighbors would take him in, sometimes for a day or 2, sometimes a week, sometimes they would go into months and what have you, which, by the way, is very common in poor parts, villages of Mexico. You have this concept of called recoger, which is translation to something like being taken in. So my mother was la recogieron los vecinos, the neighbors who took her in, and so she wound up staying with some neighbors for a few days, sometimes for a few weeks, months, etc. And then the neighbors had a hard time surviving with this additional mouth to feed. The father was good for nothing, okay? So the neighbors started struggling with different families that she would stay with, and sure enough, she wound up with one family that decided to try to find a better way of life somewhere. They started heading towards the big cities and eventually to Juarez and cross over, like, and I told you how she crossed over. Even after I went to law school and became an attorney, I never was able to fix my mother's papers and get her legalized, because the different families that would take her in would give her their last name. So my mother wound up with several different last names and also did not know when she was born. Did not know when she was born. She had no birth certificate. She just had the recollection that I just tell you she had. And you have no idea how many times while she was still alive, I went to Durango trying to find some documentation for her to make her legal. But I had no papers whatsoever. And they would have me, well, when was she born? I don't know. I can tell you more or less in the space of 5, 10 years. I don't know. And the only evidence I had was that she always would list some date of birth, some year of birth on our birth certificates. But if you put them all together, and there were a total of 9 different birth certificates, the numbers did not jive, did not make any sense. So all we had was a range of more or less when she was born. She knew her father's name. Oh, she knew his name. But it was a very common name. The last name was Guerra. Very common. Guerra translates to war. Guerra is a chief. So about as common as Gonzalez, Martinez, Gutierrez, and so forth, okay? She knew that. She knew her brother's name, sister's name. But then she wound up being taken away by all these neighbors and families, and other neighbors and families took the other children. And after my mother wound up here and married my father, she never got to see her siblings again. She heard that one time there had been some attempt for her siblings to make contact with her in El Paso, but the family that she was living with at that time did not give her the letter because they were using her as a maid and they didn't want to lose the maid services. So they didn't tell her. It was not until years later that we found out there had been that attempt to make contact. And I'm still trying to make contact. I have plans to go to Durango one last time this summer. I'll be taking my older sister with me. I was the oldest son, so there were special obligations. There's always special obligations placed on the oldest son and on the elders as well, but especially the oldest son. I did real well in school, mainly because of my father. And to this day, I still don't know how my father, with a third grade education, where he picked up his love of education, his curiosity, his tremendous vocabulary in Spanish, all of which he instilled in all of us. So I would go to school and kill myself to do well in school to please my father, who could not even read my report card by year. No, I don't mean to put down my mother. My mother provided other things to all of us. But my love of education came from my father. My love of language came from my father. My curiosity came from my father. So I did really well in school, got a scholarship. But in my junior year, my father was laid off from his job. And he was in his late 50s. So who wanted to hire him with the skills that he had? And the fact he only knew about 10 words of English, nobody wanted to hire him. But he was able to get a job as a janitor at a local hospital, working in the TB ward because nobody wanted to work there. So he got a job there in the TB ward, tuberculosis. And we were able to survive until in my senior year, he broke his leg. And because of his age, he got a real hard time healing. And so I graduated from high school and I started college on a scholarship. But very quickly I dropped out because my family needed me. And in my culture, you do what has to be done and you don't moan and groan and complain about it. So I dropped out of high school, gave up my scholarship, proceeded to get a job as a draftsman because I learned drafting in high school, and I would work 40 hours a week, and I would go to school at night. It took me 7 years to get my bachelor's degree. So what? So got my bachelor's degree, started teaching high school, and continued going to school at night, working on a master's degree. That took 5 years. So what? And then I already told you, after I had taught college for several years, I got the urge to go to law school. I went to law school. You will never encounter a more driven person than this one in front of you. I decide on a goal, and I go for it. You put the obstacles in front of me, I'll go over some, I'll go around some, and I'll go under some. And I got taught all that perseverance again by my father. My father would say things like, when there's food, we eat. When there's no food, we don't eat, and we don't complain. My father would die rather than any of us ever going on welfare. So frequently we kids would go to high school without any lunch or lunch money because we had none. Now and then, I don't know where I would get it, but I would get a couple of slices of bread, and I would pretend that there was something in between the slices of bread, and I would go with my lunch to school, and lunch hour I would go have my lunch, munch on that sandwich as if there was some bologna in or something. There was nothing. Okay, so what? And now and then, when there were any or even any slices of bread, then for the lunch hour, I would leave campus. You could in those days. I would leave campus, go walk around the block a few times, close to an hour, and then come back and send it for lunch. Okay. So anyway, after I started working, I was making more money than my father ever had in his life. That's when I moved the family out of the tenements for the very first time. I was 18 years old. We got a rental house. I filled it with furniture, cheap furniture, of course. We had an indoor bathroom, indoor plumbing, indoor heating. Wow! After that, I rented a bigger house for the family. Things started to get better. Got television set. My father asked me if I would get him a nice table radio because he loved listening to the radio programs in Spanish. I did that. And eventually I bought him a house. That's my world. That's my mundo. Not only do I look different from most people, I am different in terms of how I grew up, my culture, traditions in which I was raised, respect for elders, respect for parents, religion, Catholic religion, brought by the Spaniards over to Mexico as well. I think of myself as a Mexican American